Okay, so yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll get started now. Got a good turnout, and hopefully everyone's ready to spend a bit of time running through what drones can be used for within public safety. So let's get started. Firstly, just to introduce myself and Copters. So I've been working in the drone industry for over 5 years now. Over 4 of those I've been with Copters. We now work with a huge range of emergency services and public safety, along with working in other industries as well. But that's certainly been my focus for the 4 years that I've been here. So I pretty much exclusively work within those verticals, within those areas. So the company began in 1999 as Martech Marine. So initially, Martech did, as the name suggests, marine engineering equipment. From there, they found a need for drones to be used in tank inspection in about 2016, and saw that there was potentially more options for drones to be used in a wider range of organizations as well. So it went from there to Copters as it is today, where we now use drones to make organizations faster, safer, and more efficient. And we work across a wide range of industries now. So we train thousands of people a year in terms of the training we do, work with a huge range of emergency services, and also survey companies, construction companies, inspection and other industrial applications as well. So just a couple of quotes here from some of the guys that we've worked with in the past and that use drones within the emergency services. So we've got a quote there from Sean at West Yorkshire Police. We wanted a remote vehicle that could get into areas and reduce risk to officers whilst being able to explore and pass back intelligence. I believe that they're talking about using the Parrot Anafi drone, so some of these sort of quick launch, rapid deployment capability drones that we supply, which we'll go into in more detail shortly. You've got Tom from Devon and Cornwall Police there as well. They're one of the largest and longest running police drone teams in the UK, and use a wide range of equipment, mostly from DJI. And then you've got Perry Smith there from Norfolk Fire and Rescue, who use drones with thermal imaging cameras to find hotspots and to observe sites when there's an incident. So what we'll cover today, we're going to look at an overview of how drones are being used in public safety. So a quick look at the different applications and the different specific areas drones can be used. We're going to look at real life examples of drone success stories. So a couple of case studies. I'm sure most of you, if you work in this industry already, have seen these examples, as they're no doubt passed around internally. But we'll look at a couple, and then suffice to say there are loads more with a little bit of internet research you can find in terms of positive drone stories for emergency services as well. We'll look at how drones can save time, money, and improve safety for emergency services as the 3 main factors of why you'd use drones. We'll then look at some options. So what your options are in terms of drones for hardware, and what your options are in terms of training and continued development. On the hardware side, that'll break down into 2 main categories, which we'll focus on, which will be your smaller rapid deployment drones, and then the larger systems for pre-planned operations. Finally, we'll take a look at how Copters can help you. So purchasing processes and continued support in terms of the training side of things, the support and servicing, warranty, etc. So all that stuff that comes with either setting a drone team up within an organization or expanding what you've already got. Okay, so firstly, I'll run through some of the specific drone applications. So firstly here we've got search and rescue, which is probably the most obvious one, I'd imagine, for most people, and one of the first ones which drones have been used for. So in general, you'll use quicker launch systems for search and rescue missions. So most search and rescue missions do tend to be fairly spontaneous, although obviously there is some where there's more pre-planning involved in terms of searching larger areas. But for that reason, it's normally best to use a combination of sensors. So a good visual camera with some sort of zoom works really well, but also a thermal camera to be used in low light conditions and even daytime conditions when it's cold as well, to pick up heat spots, and then check and see potentially if there's something where someone on foot may need to go and look at further. So if you're looking at the smaller drones for search and rescue, it's more of like an added extra to ground teams. It's never going to replace the old ways of doing things. But some of the larger systems can absolutely identify and communicate with people on their own. So looking at some of the other features you'd expect from drone for search and rescue, you've got to think about your environment. So weather conditions, the time of day, the operational limitations of the drone are all really important when looking at search and rescue. And you can also look at some of these other payloads. So I mentioned speakers there as an option to communicate with people that are lost or trapped, and spotlights as well. You've also got things like drop boxes, which are evolving slowly but surely. So there's plenty more payloads as larger manufacturers are opening up their drones to development from third parties. Another application would be what I've called here emergency response. So this would be usually police, sometimes fire, responding to some sort of development where they need to effectively get an eye in the sky somewhere. So simplicity is key, is the main note I've made here. So what we see people using for these applications are drones with built-in screens, easy to launch from their carry case, features like hand launching, being able to override updates and certain safety features so they can launch whenever they need to. And again, the quick response is really important. So, again, the smaller drones tend to be preferred for this just because they're quicker to launch, easier to use, and they can be used for a range of applications. Situational appraisal, this is where you're moving towards the larger systems. So this would be your more planned missions, stuff like observing larger events and then responding to them. So if you think about things like football matches, demonstrations, I mean, we've had some huge demonstrations in the past. I mean, the past week, we've had some big demonstrations. If you can safely put a drone up in the sky above an event like that, see where there's potential areas of congestion in a crowd being moved, where you might want to move those people down side streets and divert them. And also simply things like recording evidence as well, making sure if someone is hurt or something's damaged, you've got film of that from a good angle where you can identify people. So that's where you'd use larger systems with longer flight times that can potentially be tethered as well, and also carry higher quality visual cameras. We've got reconnaissance as well. You'll see with a lot of these applications, they do kind of blend together. A lot of them do cross over into each other. So reconnaissance is similar to the one before in terms of your tracking ground events and following them, but can also be searching for people and tracking people. So again, it blends into the search and rescue side as well, but this would more be your active sort of offensive tracking rather than just looking for someone that is potentially lost. So think someone fleeing from a vehicle after a crash or after stealing a vehicle, and hiding, in an outhouse or inside a building, and you can track them into those buildings. So these are the missions where traditionally you'd have to call out a helicopter as a police force or a search and rescue organization. And if you can use a drone for a handful of those operations where you'd normally have to use a helicopter, then you're going to save a lot of money and a lot of time. It's never going to be able to replace it completely, or at least in terms of the current technology, it's never going to completely replace helicopters, but it can take up more and more of the areas where you'd have to traditionally use a helicopter. So again, the less limitations the system has, the better. So you want it to be relatively discreet. You want it to have a certain level of encryption, a good flight time, a good speed in terms of deployment of the drone, and a smaller footprint for so you have to do less pre-planning in terms of the operation. So we've got a quick case study here from Norfolk Police, from a search and rescue operation. So they were searching for a missing person in Titchwell Marshes. It was a 75-year-old male. This was about 18 months ago, I believe. He was out for a walk, as he did very, very regularly. And and unfortunately became lost in the marshes. I think the time got away from him a bit, and he got stuck where he didn't want to get stuck. They were searching for about 22 hours, and that involved 50 police officers, a police helicopter, and a Coast Guard vessel. All of these were involved trying to find where this missing person was. The drone team was called in because the police helicopter struggled to operate in the weather conditions. Not that a drone can fly in weather that a helicopter can't, but it was to do with sort of low-lying fog. And the missing person was spotted by, it was an Inspire 1 version 2 with the XT thermal camera. So a good quality resolution thermal camera. The operator was scanning a grid, effectively picked up something which looked like it could be a heat source, sent a ground team in, and they found the individual. The man was treated for hypothermia, but otherwise, apart from that, he was unharmed. We've got a couple of quotes here. So from one of the sergeants involved in the search: "Without the police drone, we would not have been able to locate him in the time we did. It allows us to search areas that are difficult to access and within close range where a helicopter may not be able to get." And then the man himself said he could hear the helicopters overhead, but thought they'd struggle to see him because of the thorny grass and reeds. It was more, to be honest, to do with the fact they couldn't get down close enough to see what they were trying to see effectively, especially in the weather conditions. And he said, I have to admit, I thought I'd be lucky to live because I'm 75 and my heart's not going to be enjoying this. So he was stuck out there drinking water from reeds, trying to keep himself conscious. And 22 hours is a long time to be stuck. So without the drone, if you're talking 3 or 4 more hours till he was found, it's really hard to say what kind of state he would have been in. So on to looking at some of the hardware options. I think you'll already found that there's some clear options in terms of the 2 routes you go down with which bits of hardware would fit with which applications. So smaller systems for rapid deployment. You've got pictured there the Parrot and Nafi thermal in the picture, and easy transportation. So a drone of this size you could launch from the bag to the air within 35 seconds to 1 minute. This just means that obviously your response times are lowered. Those 3 or 4 minutes could make a massive difference if you're looking at search and rescue missions or quick response, anything where time is going to be a factor. Traditionally, these have always been single sensor, so you've just had a visual camera. There's been some that have come out with great visual cameras like the Mavic 2 Pro, which was fairly recent, has a fantastic resolution camera, but it is just a single sensor. There has been some multi-sensor options that have now been released, like the Mavic Enterprise Dual and the Parrot and Nafi Thermal. So both of those have very similar visual cameras. The thermal camera built into them is the exact same resolution, but the visual camera on the Parrot is slightly better. But then the Mavic has some features like a speaker and a spotlight, which makes it better for some people in some applications. So what I'd say with that is, if you're looking at a quick response, a smaller unit, have a discussion with one of us here at the team and just run us through what your main applications are. And we can advise in terms of which one of those 2 will fit best. And one of them generally fits with most of what you're looking to do, and there'll be a clear path to go down. They do have a few limitations, which I think I've noted on the next slide, and obviously some massive advantages as well. So yeah, disadvantages wise, they rarely have any sort of weatherproofing. So there's no drones really in that smaller class that have any sort of IP rating. So you're going to struggle if there's any rain or any poor conditions. There's a lack of versatility as well. So there's no adaptable payloads as such. As I said, you can put speakers and spotlights on the Mavic Dual. You can't do that with the Parrot and Nafi Thermal, just on the Mavic Enterprise series. But in terms of the cameras, there's no adaptability. So you are very much stuck with the sensor you get when you purchase the drone. That's a big disadvantage long term as well, because you can't upgrade, or when you do come to upgrade, you have to upgrade the whole system. You've also got generally the low sensor quality. So if you compare a thermal camera on something like a Mavic Enterprise Dual to the larger sensors on the larger enterprise level drones, You're going to find it's about a quarter to a third of the resolution in most cases, which means you're going to have to fly a lot closer, a lot lower altitude to detect at the same rate, therefore cover less ground. In terms of some advantages, we've covered most of those already, certainly the rapid deployment and the ease of transportation, but discretion is a big one as well. They're pretty much always a lot quieter than the larger systems, have less of a footprint in the air, and a lot of them now have systems where you can turn off all the lights on them as well. So for some emergency service use, this is going to be a massive advantage, but then the opposite is true as well. So in some operations, you're going to want to be as visible as possible. And again, some of these systems like the Mavic have spotlight features where you can attach spotlights to the system and make it even more visible as well. And then the other main advantage, of course, is the price. So budget-wise, these now give you a really affordable way to get a drone with a thermal camera into the sky. And you start using it for search and rescue. Previously, you'd have to buy a big system. It takes a long set to set up, but also costs a fair bit of money. So this can be a great way to get started in terms of inspection for search and rescue. Moving on to the larger systems for pre-planned missions. So they're always going to have longer setup times. They're always going to take longer to get in the air. That's the immediate disadvantage in terms of these larger systems. So in terms of quick reaction to events, they're not as well suited as some of the smaller ones. However, the advantages, which we'll go into in a second, are massive. So you've got multiple payload configurations with much higher resolution and a wider range of applications as well. So what we've got pictured there is the Mitrice 210. I think that's the RTK model. But you've also got the Mitrice 300, which has just been launched, which fits really well within this category. So the Mitrice 300 has an IP45 rating, so it can fly in heavy rain from any direction, flying a lot of poor weather. It can also find stronger winds. It has a much longer flight time than any of the smaller systems. You can get about 45 minutes, even with payloads attached. And you can also attach some really high-end, really top-quality payloads like the H20T, which has the laser rangefinder and the really high-resolution thermal sensor. There are other non-DJI options as well, like systems from AceCore, which we supply, which carry out many of the same jobs that the Mitrice 300 does, just a little bit more complex to operate because it's not all made by the same manufacturer, and there's a bit more to it in terms of integration. But the options are certainly there. So if you're looking at a larger system but don't want to go down the DJI route, you can let us know and we can explore some of those options as well. So the advantages, I believe we've covered the main ones there. So the diversity of the system is a huge advantage. So because you can mount a massive range of cameras, you can use them on a much wider range of applications. So you're looking at everything we listed, maybe apart from some of the very quick response search and rescue, you can use these larger systems. You can also start to branch out into other types of operation, like using them for mapping, for road traffic collisions, for example, and surveillance at larger events. Other benefits, obviously, the IP rating has a massive impact because you can operate pretty much round the clock throughout the year. I mean, everyone knows how often it now rains in the UK, and how often you'd be grounded if you can't fly your drone in poor conditions. And obviously, the work that public safety and search and rescue organisations do doesn't stop because of poor conditions. So this is always something to take into account. You often get much longer flight times. You certainly do with the Mitrice 300. And you also get far more safety and redundancy features. So although they're larger, so the impact, if there was an issue, would be greater. Especially with the Mitrice 300 series now, you've got multiple redundancies internally in terms of the IMUs and the GPS. You've also got a failure system where if one propeller fails, the drone will land on 3 props, which is a first for a quadcopter. Many more safety and redundancy features, which mean effectively it's not going to fail. There's a very, very low chance of any issues. There's also the fact that payloads have far greater resolution and image quality. So again, taking that example of the Mitrice 300, you've got these 640 by 512 resolution thermal camera with a 30 hertz refresh rate, which compared to what you'd get on, say, the Mavic Dual at 160 by 120 is a big jump up. And again, it just allows you to do more work with the same system. And then the disadvantages of the larger systems, you've got longer setup times. So as I said, you're going from maybe a minute or less to sort of 5 minutes. The systems are larger, so harder to transport. You can fit them in most vehicles. It's not really the vehicle that's the issue, but sometimes you can only drive so far, and then you have to end up lugging it through a field. And again, in those instances, it can be easier to have something that's a bit smaller and easier to launch. And then the main disadvantage for most, especially the search and rescue organizations, which are charity or voluntarily funded, will be the price. So obviously they're going to be more expensive because they're so much more capable. But again, this can be an aspirational thing. So you can start with the smaller systems, which are perfectly capable up to a point, and then upgrade to something larger and more capable when the concept's proven, and funding might be available for a more comprehensive system. We've got a few honourable mentions here in terms of mission-specific hardware as well. So we do supply internal operation drones. So the Flyability Elios 2 is the caged drone that you might have seen on some of our promotional material on our website and that kind of stuff. So you can fly that into structures, into buildings, into caves, for example, for search and rescue missions. And again, that has a built-in thermal camera. Some police forces are using those to clear buildings already as a system. And then we've also got an exciting new drone called the Sky Hero Loki 2, which is effectively a tactical drone for launching into buildings, to clear buildings for police before operations. So you can send that drone in, doesn't matter if it gets damaged. It's got a night vision camera built in with a visual camera, and it can effectively clear room by room before officers enter. And then you've also got tethered systems and fixed wing drone systems. So the tethered systems that we supply would be great for, again, monitoring larger events, keeping your drone up for basically indefinitely, and then you can release it from the tether to follow a target. So if you're at a large demonstration or event and there's someone you want to follow, you can observe them for a certain amount of time, launch from the tether, and effectively follow them until they can be apprehended, or whatever might be the end use there. In terms of the fixed wing drone systems for search and rescue and emergency service use, they're not being taken up massively as yet, but there will be a need for them at some stage. So just scanning larger areas with high resolution cameras for search and rescue, but also mapping areas for rescue or recon missions as well. We've got another quick case study here. So this is Devon and Somerset fire, and this was a barn fire that took 10 crews over 5 hours to stop. The barn itself contained 20 vehicles, and they used drone images to show where the fire was spreading and allow crews to organise. So the drone footage showed the dispersion of smoke. It showed them the hotspots and where to target their activity, and also when it was safe to move closer or even enter the building. The footage also can be used as part of this live to basically keep the site secure. Obviously, a lot of the time when there's events like this, members of the public will like to try and get close themselves, take pictures, and get involved when otherwise it's unsafe. So again, the drone can be used to just secure the perimeter effectively and make sure no one's incurring into the site of the event. And obviously also categorize the footage for future reference for training purposes. So you've got overhead video of this barn fire and what the firefighters did on site, what they maybe could have done better, what they can learn from for next time. So again, another advantage of drone use there. Now we're just quickly going to touch on Copter's continued support, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So if you haven't already, I've actually not checked, so I'm not seeing how many questions, so I might regret asking this if we've got loads, but please do post your questions in the questions section, not in the chat section. and then we'll go through those once we've done this section. If you are looking at setting up a drone team of sorts, we have a approved repair center for the main drone manufacturers, including DJI, which is fully approved, which means that any issues you have, the drones can be repaired and maintained by us in Leeds in the UK, rather than being sent overseas, just to maintain the lowest amount of downtime possible for a drone team. We've got fully accredited drone training staff, so both in terms of you training up to be qualified with your PFCO, or when the new legislation eventually comes in what's now looking to be December, but could well be rolled back again, the A2 CFC or the GVC, whichever's the most relevant for your organisation. We carry out all that training, but also specific training on drones, different systems and different scenarios, both flight coaching and general handovers as well. So in terms of the handovers, if you were looking at one of the larger systems, something like the Mitrice 300, we'd carry out a handover as part of that package with you, so that you can hit the ground running and get operating with its full capability as soon as possible. You've also got an extended 24-month warranty on all that enterprise level equipment. So any of the drones we've discussed today, I don't think there's any exceptions there, would be covered by a 24-month warranty. You'd also get ongoing tech support. So we have a team of tech support officers who can answer any questions you've got. What we often find with people from emergency services that purchase these drones is they don't come from a drone geek, a techie kind of computer background. They've been asked to explore this as a serving officer, and that's where their skill set lies. And they often need a fair bit of support to get up and running. Some of the issues they have can be solved by just a quick run through, for example, the firmware. And the last thing you want is to be grounded by something really simple and not being able to use that new drone you've just convinced your boss to invest a few £1,000s in. So the tech support is really important if you want to get the most out of your equipment, and that'll be offered with every enterprise level drone that's purchased. And that's the same as the servicing that we offer as well. So every 6 months, we advise you get your drone serviced, or within a certain number of flight hours, depending on the drone, which again we can advise. So we'll do that in line with the warranty. So every 6 months over the course of that 24 months, and then we can advise at the end of that 24 months whether it's worth potentially looking at getting new equipment, or whether the stuff you've got is still fully operational with no issues. But the bottom line of that is that if you do purchase a larger system, we can offer all the training to get your guys qualified. We can offer the servicing and support to make sure that you keep operating without any issues for the lifetime of the drone. So I think that is everything, and we'll just move on to the questions. So we've got a couple of questions here that hopefully we answered during the course of the presentation. So is there a specific type of drone you need for public safety? And what areas can drones help me in the fire service? I imagine we've covered most of that with what we've gone through. In terms of specific types, I think you'll have seen that the overriding opinion is that you have a larger kind of pre-planned mission drone system, and then a smaller quick response drone system. And those are your two kind of main categories, although there are very specific drone equipment pieces for specific needs. It varies, depending on what your planned application is going to be. How am I able to get my foot in the door with emergency services? That's a tricky question to answer, just because at the minute, there's no national kind of plan as such in terms of which emergency service has its own fully capable 24/7 drone team and which might just have the odd few pilots. If a emergency service is looking to scale up but doesn't have the staff available, they do hire in external staff. Anecdotally, what I've been told is that people have effectively messaged via LinkedIn or via email or called someone that's in a drone team on a police force and just said, next time there's an incident where you could use a drone, I'm more than happy to help. I've got this drone, this qualification, this insurance, and I've been flying for X amount of years. Let me know if you need me. And that's the best thing to do. The last thing you want to do is to be pestering police forces, fire services, search and rescue organizations, and thinking that just because you have a drone that you've bought, you can be an asset to them. You want to bring a certain level of skills and a certain level of equipment that can be used to them if that's what you're looking to do. With SAR drones, what platform system can track individuals and record location when the drone has to abandon the SAR mission due to battery power running low? In terms of tracking individuals, some of again, that's something where you're going to move up to the larger, more expensive systems. So the Mitrice 300 with its H20 series camera has an object track where it will track individuals' vehicles, for example, using the camera. The camera itself will follow the individual across the screen. In terms of sort of logging location, so there's a few ways to do that. You can use inspection-based software effectively to geolog a location, but also there is a laser rangefinder on the Mitrice 300, and that will give you within a good degree of accuracy, so 20 centimeters if you're close enough, up to a couple of meters if you're a huge distance. But that will give you again a location based on where that's tracked, so you can record using that and then return. How do you get around all the pre-planning legally when carrying out a quick deployment? Is this down to having an OSC? It completely depends on the organization. So police forces, fire services, for example, most of what they do is quick deployment based. So they will have it written into their operations and the way they work. But there will be times where they can't do anything more than a quick, visual pre-flight risk assessment, and that has to tick the box for them in terms of operating. They also have OSCs for certain things, and also extended permissions, which a member of the public will not be able to achieve. So think of it the same as what they do with police vehicles. Most of the time, they're driving around obeying the rules of the road, but there are times when they have to do things that as a civilian you can't do. What are your views on the unique H520? To be honest, we've never dealt with unique. Initially, when we sort of first got going about 4 years ago, we had discussions with them, and we were never really happy with what they brought to the table. We made our decision then in terms of the manufacturers that we wanted to work with, and all I'd say on that, without going into too much detail, is I think we've been proven right in terms of who we've gone with. Although the Anafi Thermal and Mavic Dual have the same size thermal sensor, I thought the former has a better resolution RGB camera. Yes, correct, it does. So the Anafi Thermal has a better visual sensor. It's 21 megapixels compared to, I believe it's 12 on the Mavic Dual. This does have an effect because, as you've put there, there is the radiometric option on the Anafi Thermal as well, so you can get slightly higher quality data from the thermal camera. The thermal sensors, although they are the same size and you get the same data from those, the visual camera means that when the images are blended, which is what these dual sensors do, you get a slightly better readout in terms of what's on your screen there and then. So I'd agree with that, and I'd probably say if I was looking at choosing one of those two systems just based on the output of the camera, the Anafi Thermal would be the choice to go for every time. It's just weighing up whether some of the extra features the Mavic Dual has are worth, one, the extra money because it is slightly more expensive, but two, the camera being, on the balance of things, slightly lower resolution. So we've got, how does flight time limit affect the use of drones? To be honest, not as much as you would have thought. A lot of people think it's the be all and end all, but you can. I mean, the difference in terms of 5 minutes of flying, if you've got enough batteries to be operating, effectively on a cycle, then landing 5 minutes earlier to change your batteries and get back in the air isn't going to make a huge difference. What I would say is when you get to the sort of 10, 15, 20 minutes, that's where it can make a big difference. So the jump in technology to the Mitrice 300, which has given it a much longer battery time than the smaller systems, that's when you see a real advantage. Do we offer any deals for emergency service members? So currently, the only thing we're doing for emergency service members is free access to the online aspect of our PFCO training. So if you're a member of the emergency services, you can message myself, email myself, and we can sign you up to do the all 8 of the theory modules and then the theory test of your PFCO. So then the only thing you need to do and pay for is your flight test, and then you've got the full PFCO. So that's going to save sort of £400 or £500 in terms of the training costs. In terms of equipment, we don't do any sort of emergency services discounts or anything like that, like a blue light discount. But we do package drones and training together. We work with the larger organizations to make sure they can get equipment that then feeds down. So if you're part of a larger search and rescue organization, or regionally you can collect together, then there's always a good chance of getting a good offer in terms of the equipment put together. No mention of aerial scanning for USAR or accident investigation. Yeah, Tony, if that's something you're more interested in, please do drop me an email after this. More than happy to discuss it further. It's just something that's very quite specific, quite niche, and probably won't be applicable to most people. So yeah, happy to send you more information and have a chat on that after this if you want to. How do you stream a live feed to officers in the field? Yeah, so there's quite a few options out there, to be honest. Flight Hub Enterprise is one of those options, which can well be used. There are third-party options from a variety of companies, some of which we are able to supply as well. And then there are your cheaper budget options in terms of just doing stuff like screen mirroring apps on certain systems. So using Skype for Business and that kind of thing. For your lower end applications. But there's quite a lot of different options out there. And when you're putting together a drone package, that's something we can discuss with you and include that in the package as well. Many of the safety applications may or do fall outside PFCO legislation. Is there a legal framework you have to follow, or are these applications exempt because they involve public safety issues? They're not exempt straight away. So then it's not just a case of I can do this because I'm doing this for public safety. There are obviously certain things you have to do to meet these. If it's a concern, again, please send me an email. We can pick up the sort of legislation side in more detail, and I can put you in touch with one of our trainers who can run you through sort of exactly what you'll have to do. Because again, it's something where we've worked with specific, for example, police forces and help them write their operations manual to fit with exactly what they're going to do. I thought GVC was more in line with PFCO than A2 CFC. Yeah, I mean, without going into too much detail on this, because it's something that we've gone into on quite a few webinars that have been based specifically around training. It's basically just it's a completely different way of classifying it. So the PFCO is a permission for commercial operation. So it's all based on whether you will be operating for a business or commercially or not. And that's the classification. With the new regulations, that's not how it's judged. So it doesn't matter whether what you're doing is commercial or you're just flying for fun. That's not the defining category. So they've just switched around. The CA just switched around the way they're doing it. What I would say is, again, that's been pushed back from initially July to then November to now December. So it keeps getting pushed back because they're not quite ready to roll it out. So if that's stopping you from getting going, the best advice I can give is get it done, get your PFCO done. You'll have grandfather rights, which will cover you when the new regulations come in, as and when they do. It's not something to worry about too much for the foreseeable future because it's taking a while to get going. I've got a question on the live streaming there, which I think we've covered. The Swell Pro waterproof drone. Yeah, I have looked at them. I think, to be honest, it's a little bit of a gimmick. They do that one thing very well in terms of being waterproof, but every other aspect of being a drone, they're not the best. So yeah, in terms of something as a serious piece of equipment, I'd avoid stuff like that. It's more of a high-end toy, to be honest. A question from Mike there on the sort of getting licensed for drone survey in the construction sector. Mike, again, if you want to drop me an email after this, that'd be great. I can put you in touch with one of the guys who specifically works in sort of survey and construction who can give you some tips on that. Would the CIA be likely to allow beyond visual line of sight exemptions with the Mitrice 300? Likely in comparison to other systems, potentially yes, because they've got much more safety and redundancy features, certainly more so than your smaller stuff like Mavics and the older Mitrices. Again, likely, it depends on a lot of things because that's more to do with the organization than just the equipment. So if you've been flying for 10 years and you've got tons of experience and you've done loads of work with drones in tricky areas, you're much more likely to be able to get those exemptions. Would it be possible to integrate downloaded footage from the Mavic 2 or M300 into an existing digital asset management system? Yes, yeah. So the M300 has its own asset management system that comes with sort of AI within the system itself. But yes, you can link them into various, both sort of flight management and asset management systems as well. How long is the training? Again, if you drop me an email on that in terms of if you're looking at doing the training, we can get back in touch and run you through sort of the options for that. And then, is there any features on the Mavic Dual that are disabled for customers but only available to law enforcement? No, there isn't. I mean, there is some things you can do with enterprise level drones as law enforcement, i.e. have certain restrictions taken off. But there are no features that it has that are only available to law enforcement. With the Anafi Thermal, that is a different story. There is a specific model that has features that the civilian model effectively doesn't have. But with the Mavic, it's just one model, so all the features are available. In terms of the, again, thermography course, Gareth, if you want to drop me an email on that, we can get some answers over to you in terms of the thermography course. I've noticed there was a couple of questions in the chat which I think haven't made it across to the questions, and we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'll just check through some of these and see if we've missed anything, but I think we've covered pretty much everything there. Yeah, I think we've got most stuff captured. There's just one last one coming there on the regulations. So yeah, again, on the regulations, please do take a look at, we've got blog posts, we've got webinars based entirely on the regulations, all this kind of stuff. In terms of the grandfather rights thing, it's my understanding currently, because it's been pushed back again recently to December, that if you get your PFCO before December, you do qualify for those grandfather rights. You've made me doubt myself a little bit there, so potentially you could well be right, Paul. Again, I can double check that for you, and if it's something you need to know, I can get that across to you in an email. But as I said, there's tons of resources for that on our website, so you can see various blog posts which explain the rules and regulations very clearly, and I'm sure we'll do more webinars on the training specifically in the future as well. So for those asking, you've got my email address there, so it's just sam.denniff@copters.com. You will get sent an option for a recording of this as well, so if you've missed any parts of it or the audio dropped out, you'll be able to run through that. Any further questions, please do drop me an email, either as a response to what we send out immediately after or just directly to me. Either way, it all comes through to me so I can answer you directly. And hopefully I'll hear from a few of you in the future in terms of setting up a drone side to your public safety organisation or search and rescue organisation. So thanks very much for joining me today, everyone. As I said, I hopefully will speak to some of you very soon. And thank you very much for your time.